This is new to me and I'm making kind of like a vlog style video today. If you want to get straight to the point and skip all of the jibber jabber fluff, you can head on over to the description and I created chapters so you can skip over to where I actually start showing the containers, and that's fine. I'll just miss you. I had a friend of mine who recently mentioned to me that she couldn't wait to buy her own home so that she can have her own yard where she can grow her own food. And I'm here to say that that's not necessary, whether you're in an apartment in a high-rise in downtown or renting someone else's house, or maybe your house just doesn't have as big of a yard as you wish you'd have, or you're in my situation where we sold our house and we are temporarily staying in our RV at an RV park where all the RVs are like almost stacked on top of each other. If I go outside and extend my arm, I can probably touch the RV next to us. It's like one after the other, or even your soil. Like, we just visited my son in Abilene, Texas. He's stationed out in Dyess Air Force Base, and all of the soil out there is clay. It is really hard, and I'm pretty sure it'd be difficult to grow in ground out there unless you are heavily amending the soil or you are growing in raised beds or in containers. In that situation, whatever the situation is, it can be done. You can bring your plants indoors if you have a small space next to your kitchen, or even in a closet if you have an extra closet where you have some space. Set yourself up some grow lights. Doesn't have to be super big and fancy. It could be inexpensive. Or if you want to grow on a windowsill, if you have smaller plants that fit on a windowsill, south facing window would be best because it gets the most sun exposure. Just get creative with the space. Like in our situation, I haven't even counted, but about 20 to 30, possibly more plants just outside of the perimeter of our RV. There's so many container friendly plants and crops that you can start growing today. And if you stick around to the end of the video, you'll catch some bloopers, or you can just skip on over there. But I have already made a handful of bloopers and I'm only in the first couple of minutes of the video, and I'm pretty sure that there will be more to come. Like I said, even if you live inside, what? Normally people live inside, Lisa. Okay, but first, coffee. I'm trying to kick the coffee habit. Honestly, I don't like how I am addicted to the caffeine. If I don't have coffee by a certain time of the day, I start getting really bad headaches, and I don't like how my body is dependent on the caffeine. So I'm actually going to start switching to natural teas. Now, I've had passion fruit leaves that I grew and dried for a little while in this jar, and I haven't used it. I've foraged dandelion in my previous home. I would go outside every day and forage around the yard and then dry the leaves and the roots, and I still have some dandelion leaves that I can use. I have dehydrated strawberries that are really good in these teas. So take some strawberries and pop them in to the hot water when you are steeping the leaves, and it just gives it a nice natural sweet tone to the tea. So I need to start switching over, and the coffee's almost done, so we're getting there. Say it is so awkward recording out here. In my previous home, I had a privacy fence all around the house and I was able to record with no worries. But here, see, this is how close we all are. Turn this around, show you back here. People look at me, but that's okay. I'll have to get over that. It's the joys of recording and creating content. So let's show you what you can plant. And this is just a small little list of a whole bunch of different varieties and options for you. First up are herbs. So we have basils here. We've got parsley, cilantro, rosemary. lemon balm, which I recently cut all the way back and it's starting to regrow. It's very similar to mint in that way where you can cut it all the way back down and you'll always get new growth. Thyme, mint, which is also growing back after being cut down. Sage, which is my daughter's favorite. It is kind of stressed out. It could have been from the frost, but it's still growing in okay. It looks like I have some new growths. This here, we like to cook this on the stovetop in some butter until it gets nice and crispy, and it is really good. We eat it just like that, but we also put it into pastas or as a sauce for gnocchi, on chicken. A lot of different ways you can use it. Second on the list are carrots. Now, these are not actual carrots that I'm growing for the root vegetable. What I'm doing is I'm growing these for the tops, but I have grown actual carrots for the roots themselves, like the actual vegetable. The only thing with carrots is the soil needs to be loose. It has to be free of hard wood chips or little rocks, because if they touch or encounter a little obstacle, they will kind of grow deformed. But this is a really good option. Just make sure that the soil is very loose and fluffy so that they can grow to the best of their abilities. Good morning. I have to pause for a moment and just say that that encounter wasn't as awkward as it would normally be, because I met this gentleman before and he came around and he also grows. He's out here from a different state. He had stopped me one day and was talking about my plants, and he just came around and gifted me a bottle of wine that he actually made himself. So I'm really thankful and so happy about this little encounter. So sweet. So I also gifted him something from the garden. I gave him one of the ají dulce peppers that I started a couple of months ago. So it's a nice little good size plant. And yeah, I was able to kind of do a little exchange. I thought that was really cool. Anyhow, back to the content. These are sugar snap peas, and they are a vining variety, but you can find peas that are more like a bush where it'll grow a little shorter than this and you don't need supports like I have here. This one doesn't grow too tall, so it's okay. It works out just fine, and it's in a 5-gallon container. It is semi-stressed from the recent frost, but it's doing just fine. It's already starting to flower, so I can't wait to try it. I've actually never tried sugar snap peas ever in my life, but I know that they're sweet and that's what I want them for. Next up are blueberries. Now these are really great to grow in containers because they are so finicky when it comes to their soil. They require a much more acidic soil mixture, and it needs to be really well draining. They do not like their roots to stay wet. The blueberries that I have here, both of them do really well in Florida. They're both southern high bushes. During the 3 nights of frost that we recently had, all of the little fruits that were already forming shriveled up and fell off. But I'm thankful that it has started to bloom again. If I can focus here, I've got some new flowers, and each one of these flowers will become its own fruit. The size of these containers are 15 gallons, and they will stay in this. In a 15-gallon, these will actually grow 4, even 5 feet tall. So it'll still do really well in this size container, and that's where they will stay for their life. Next on the list is celery. Now this is celery that I had purchased from the grocery store, and I saved the bottom root part of the celery and I plopped it in some soil, and they have regrown for me. So they are still in the early stages of growth, but you can purchase celery seeds and start it from seed. You'll get some nice long thick stalks that you can keep harvesting the outsides of and then leave the inside alone so that it continue to grow for you. Next up are green onions and garlic. Green onions are the little plant that will just keep on giving and giving and giving and giving. I've had these for over a year. I've given it plenty of haircuts, and they just continue to grow for me. But I've got my garlic over here. That's also really good to grow in containers. Onions are another option for you. I grow onions in larger containers, but in these smaller ones, I'm only growing onions for their tops. So I cut the bottom of the onions while I was in the kitchen cooking, and I put them in smaller little containers just for the tops. So I'm not expecting another onion to grow, although if I were to just leave this in here for another few months, I can still harvest some smaller sized onions, which is cool. But for this particular purpose, I'm only growing them for the tops. I recently planted 2 shallots in here, and one of them has sprouted, waiting for the other one back here. Next on the list are sweet potatoes, and this is such a sad example that I'm setting right here, but this all died recently due to the frost. So I'm going to show some photos of what this actually looked like before, so that you can appreciate how this actually looks when we are not hit with 20-degree weather 3 nights in a row. Now I'm leaving this container alone just the way it is because there are still sweet potatoes underneath the soil, and I know that they will form new sprouts. The cool thing about sweet potatoes is you not only get a good harvest from the tubers themselves, but you can also harvest the leaves, which I have done several times, and I have used it as a spinach substitute. It has a very mild flavor, almost a sweet hint behind the leaf flavor, so it's really good and it's versatile. You can add it to a lot of different dishes. Next on the list are raspberries, and this is another poor example of a raspberry vine growing in this 20-gallon container. So I am going to show some photos of what this looked like before the frost. Again, I have some dieback here. It's still alive. I'm just waiting for the new growth to set in. This one here is good to grow in containers. Raspberries tend to spread, and they will continue to spread, and this contains that spread. So if you can get yourself a larger size container like this 20-gallon fabric container that I have here, they'll grow in. This is still a fairly new raspberry vine. I recently purchased this, and on the screen you'll see some photos of what it looked like when it was just a little baby. And a few months later, I have a couple of vines that are already a few feet tall. Another great option for you are pepper plants. So I've grown many different types of peppers in containers. I have here some ají dulce peppers, which I just gifted that gentleman that pulled up here on his bicycle. I gifted him one of these smaller plants, but I have grown, let me show you. Back here, I have a Suave Numex pepper that I just cut down. It is technically overwintering, but it's still alive. In my previous home this last summer, I had so many different peppers. I had jalapeno peppers, habanero peppers, serrano chili peppers, sweet bell peppers, all growing in different size containers from 3 gallons, which the smaller the pepper, the smaller the container. So I had a few Suave Numex peppers growing, also some habaneros growing in 3-gallon containers. And then I had some jalapeno peppers growing in 5-gallon containers. And then the sweet bell peppers, which are bigger peppers, were growing in 20-gallon fabric containers. Now I have this little cayenne pepper plant here. It's funny because the seed packet that I had purchased had about 20 to 30 seeds in them. This was the only one that I was able to get to stay alive. So some of them germinated, sprouted, and then died on me soon after they had first sprouted. But this one here was my little survivor, and I'm thankful for that. I consider it my little prized cayenne pepper plant. This one's in a smaller container, but I will be up potting it once it grows a little larger. It'll most likely live in a 10-gallon container. Next on the list are radishes. These are so fun to grow, especially if you're just getting into growing. These can be harvested in 30 days if you start it from seed, and if they get full sunlight, at least 6 to 8 hours of sunlight per day. And it's really fun for the kids too. It's almost instant gratification. Next on the list are your lettuces or your Swiss chard, your kale. Those can be grown easily in containers of all different sizes. If you want to space your lettuce closely together, where you are harvesting it as more like a loose leaf lettuce, not so much for the actual lettuce head, it's better to do that out here in Florida because we do have a lot of pest pressure. And if you're trying to wait to grow a full head of lettuce, by the time you get that full head at the end of the growing season, you're probably having to battle different types of pests. Whereas if you space the seeds very closely together and you grow it kind of like a loose leaf lettuce style, you can continue harvesting and it will keep growing in for you. Another option for you are tomatoes. Now, I don't have an example to show you right now because I had 4 tomato plants that were growing in 3-gallon containers. They were Everglades tomatoes and they were doing lovely until the frost hit. But there are 2 main types of tomatoes that you can grow. One is determinate and the other is indeterminate. If you're growing in containers, I recommend growing determinate varieties. Determinate just means that it grows to a certain size. It's generally much smaller, like 1 or 2 feet tall, and it gives you a main harvest. You harvest that main crop and then it's done. It's done producing for you. Whereas indeterminate, it's a little harder to maintain or contain in a container because it grows more like a vine. So they can grow, 8, 9 feet tall if you let them. So I would recommend determinate, and the ones that I had growing are called Tiny Tim tomatoes. They grow about 1.5 to maybe 2 feet tall, and it gives you so many tomatoes on that one little plant. So I had a couple of them growing and it worked out really well for me. I hope you enjoyed this list and learning about what you can grow in containers in smaller spaces. And until next time. In my case, I have own house, and why do I always do this? Mentioned to me that salads and lettuce. Wow, I really need to script this out. I have dried raspberries, so I have dehydrated strawberries that are the bottom, and I created